My colleague Karen will continue to post a link to the slides in the chat window. So scroll up and down and you should be able to see that where you can download them. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, whatever, during the webinar today, please type them into the chat window. And if you've asked for a certificate of participation, you had that option when you registered, and we will be doing those in the next week or so. We get quite a number of attendees, so it takes us a little time to process them. But if you don't see it by, mid next week or something, let us know. I also have, you can see some videos showing here. I have some colleagues, friends from that I've met over the years who are also interested in brains and learning and all the kind of stuff we do. So I'll introduce them when we get to that point. So I tried to design our session today as I would if this were an online class, and sort of a model for thinking about your class sessions and how you can structure them. My first piece of advice is that you shouldn't do too much. Less is more when it comes to online learning. It doesn't matter how much you cover. The only thing that matters is what the learning is that happens. So what I have done is broken down the time into what I'm going to refer to as stretches. If you listen to graduate school professors talk about this, they call them sprints. But if you're a sprinter, you can call them sprints. But I've decided I'm not a sprinter. I'm more of a stretcher, a nice little gentle stretch. And I also like the sort of connection to stretching our minds, which is hopefully what we're going to be doing. For elementary students, 5 to 10 minute stretches is good. Just, connects with where they are in terms of attention generally. And it doesn't mean you're changing topic every 5 or 10 minutes. It just means you're changing the modality, or you're changing the activity, or you're doing something that refreshes it and that helps them stay tuned and keep their attention. The schedule has planned time in it for a beginning ritual and a closing ritual. And as you'll see, hopefully little of this today is going to be about lecturing. In fact, one of the most powerful things you can do for remote learning is to do what's called flip your classroom. And a flipped classroom means that rather than lecturing and presenting and giving information during class, you might do a short video on a couple of different topics, and that's homework before the class. And then what happens in class is interacting with, practicing the material, doing something that's more interactive and engaging. So in terms of a opening social ritual, I've done this in both in-person PD and also in online PD. Often start with 1 minute of just mindfulness breathing, that everybody gets a chance just to settle for a minute. It doesn't take really long, but it's amazing how it helps you just sort of get rid of all the stuff that you have had going around you before you came into your classroom, and the same thing for your students. The next thing I do is something that sort of acknowledges everybody, brings everybody into the room. And I call this something good and new. And my something good and new, I'll share mine first, and then I'm going to ask my friends. In fact, I'll introduce them now. So we have Dr. Lou Whitaker, who is just an amazing person. She's been a principal and administrator, taught, a colleague in Brady Bunch, and does a lot of PD on neuroscience and education. Also, we have Dr. Judy Belk, who is a speech and language pathologist and auditory expert, and works with kids who have lots of learning struggles, trying to tease apart and help them with what they need. Susan Clayton is also another Brady Bunch colleague, and someone who is very knowledgeable, works with a lot of different kinds of individuals. Susan, I probably should let you describe what you do.
Actually, I'm an education consultant with a focus on curriculum. And I think what I find most interesting about my work is I work in different cultures,
Ah,
not just the Western culture, but in Eastern cultures, and bringing neuroscience to those folks who are steeped in 3,000 and 4,000 years of tradition about what they think teaching and learning is incredibly challenging. It keeps my brain moving.
oh, bless your heart. That's right. Okay. So we're going to start with something. We just want to share something good and new. So it's something that's good and positive and something that also is maybe new since the last time. And I had a really good one this morning and I can't remember what it is, but I'm going to say that my good and new is this is the first time I've been able to do a webinar like this where I had a few panelists to join in the interactive to model what a remote classroom might be like. Lou, do you want to share a good and new?
Yeah, sure. I was trying to think of something, and well, I got on the treadmill today, and I walked 2.5 miles, and I beat my record by 2 seconds. Now that's no, that's not any, you know, national or state record, but it's good for me.
Excellent, wonderful. Judy.
Well, all right, I'm going to try to find something that's not just brainy. Just, I like the Fitbit idea. Yes, yes, I find that even I need to get some feedback about how I'm doing, and not just thinking about it, but actually hear from a coach or hear from a Fitbit kind of thing that, yeah, this is motivating.
Okay,
I'm accomplishing something.
great. Susan, how about something good and new in your life?
I'm having to learn to do things that I've never had to do by myself before. And I'm learning how to be my own contractor during a rather extensive reno project in my kitchen.
Wow.
And I'm
Gosh.
keeping my cool, even though it's very frustrating.
Great. Yeah, so feel free to use something like that. Feel free to use your own or have your students come up with a ritual. But the idea is that you're creating something that is dependable. When when your students are experiencing it, they know this is what our community does. This is what this group that we belong to. And it also is because if you do something that helps people focus on positive, then it helps us get ready for learning. When we're in a more positive mood, thinking more positive thoughts, we're more open to learning. I also sort of like this because you don't really have to take attendance. It's not like you're just going to call out lists and say here, but you will have connected briefly with everybody in the class, and you know that they're there. So, and that was the first stretch. Stretch number 2, we're going to move on. It's about interacting with and getting feedback from students. Judy was just talking about feedback. And when you're in this Zoom meeting. So this is a picture of I think a typical Zoom meeting. You know, you see the faces are a little blurry. You can sort of see them, you sort of can't. If you're sharing their screen like we're doing today, of course, the pictures are pretty small. For some students, you really can't see them very well, or they're hiding. They've got their hoodies down over their faces. Often no one will talk, or sometimes when they decide they want to talk, they talk all over each other. Or when they type in the chat window, they're interacting with the keyboard. They're not interacting with you the way that they would. So here's a technique that is fun and people are finding to be quite effective. Some of you may have already tried this. I'm not going to suggest that everybody go out and learn American Sign Language, but we are going to teach, I'm going to teach, and we're going to practice 4 signs that I have learned recently because I thought they would be really helpful in an online classroom. So let's get started. One of the ones that I really like, and here I'm going to move my video, my webcam so you can see me. This gesture, so you put your hand like this, and you move it towards yourself and then out towards the other person means me too or same. So if you're connecting with an idea or somebody has, oh yeah, I think that too, you can just use this motion. I also think that, especially students, we want to know if they understand things. And so I picked understand and don't understand. And conveniently, these are very similar, but what is different is the gesture, the movement of your head. So you put your hand sort of like in a fist up by your temple, and you pop your finger up. And while you're doing that, you shake your head if up and down, nod your head up and down if you understand, and shake your head back and forth if you don't understand. Okay, so let's practice me too. Understand, don't understand. Okay, and I hope everybody who's watching this today is trying the same thing, because when you actually do the gesture, it's going to help you remember it. And the last one, and apparently this sign was developed specifically for online meetings, is applause.
Yes.
You sort of shake your hands back and forth next to your head. Okay, so let's do it one more time. Same, me too. Understand. Don't understand. Okay, now everybody give some applause. Terrific. Okay. Kids love to do this. You don't need to teach them 4 at once. You can start with just 1 at a time, but the kids really do enjoy this, and it is a way to get more interaction going without more noise. Okay, stretch 3 is about the mindsets that our students have in their remote learning experiences. And there's, of course, a lot of research on motivation and what gets students to engage. A lot of it has to do with students' belief about themselves as well as the situation they're in, but their beliefs about their potentials, their beliefs about how relevant things are, has a huge impact on engagement. So I'm going to spend a little time talking about these 3 mindsets. If this were a regular online class where we were coming every day or once a week or whatever it happened to be, this I could do a short video of in a flipped classroom and have this be pre-work. And then of course, we would spend and be a little bit more interactive in this part of it. So the first one is a sense of belonging. And, you know, it's a really interesting time. We are seeing more into the lives of our students than probably ever we've ever been able to do, because they're at home, they're in their environment. We see mom and dad, or the dog or the cat or the sister or whatever it is, all that stuff in the background. So we really, in some ways, have more insights. And but it's also more important because, partly because of that we all can feel good and feel safe about bringing our authentic selves to the learning experience. Maybe the best version of our authentic selves, but nonetheless, we bring our lives and ourselves to that. And there's some ways to do this, to acknowledge that students are in an environment and to take advantage of that fact in a way that you can't bring that into the classroom. You can't unless you have like show and tell or have them bring things in. But if you're studying shapes and you're studying squares, you could have students find something in their environment. I just reached over and picked up my Kleenex box, and it's not exactly a square. In fact, we could talk about the fact that it's not exactly. It's a little bit taller than it is wide. But you know, this is a way of kids really applying it and bringing that to life in their own environment. Don't use Zoom backgrounds. I'm glad that we're seeing all of us in our real environments here. Zoom backgrounds make you look like a ghost. There's all kinds of like atmospheric stuff going around you. It distorts your image, and you want to be. And a lot of teachers are actually teaching from their classrooms. So think about, you know, putting behind you the things that make you seem real and make you seem like the familiar teacher that they know. Beginning with a social ritual is also about belonging. It's something that everybody should be feeling, I know this ritual, this is something I'm used to, this is part of the community that I belong to here. Another aspect of fostering engagement is to be sure that every student speaks and every student hears his or her name spoken by someone else. This is sort of an interesting, the teachers that I've done this with have said it really helps them structure their, the interactions so that they can make sure that this happens. Otherwise, it's too easy, especially in remote, to have, people feel not engaged. But when they know that they're going to have an opportunity to speak, sometimes this can be calling on somebody, especially if you have those kids that don't, hand isn't up, call on me, call on me, call on me. And one of the things that I've realized is that there are ways to engage students without putting them on the spot, but that can be in a very encouraging, a way that really helps them understand that this is about a learning experience, not a test or a challenge. So just to give a little bit of an example, we'll see how this works. So Lou, I know I didn't tell you I was going to call on you.
It's okay.
But you're so shy. You're so shy. I know I have to call on you.
Okay.
So when you think about every student speaking, what are some ways that you might be able to do that in an online environment?
Just by starting the conversation, let's say I call on Betty, and then Betty has to pick someone from the class also. In other words, when she's through speaking, I love your idea of find a square, find a box. Immediately I started looking for something that was square. This is as close as I could get. But then I could pass it and I could say, okay, call on someone in the class that you have not, has not spoken yet.
Right. So that's great. And if that wasn't quite the answer I wanted, I could just be a little bit Socratic and then we could go with that. And the point is there's not a wrong answer. Right. I help you get to the answer, and an answer that really has meaning. So that's sense of belonging. Connecting to purpose and relevance. Now, of course, we always want to do this in lessons, but it's arguably even more important because in our classroom, we can sort of shame or embarrass kids sometimes into like paying attention or doing stuff they don't really want to do, or do it because I said so. But the fact of the matter is students don't get engaged if they don't care about it, if it has no meaning. Our brains need a reason to learn something. Our brains consume a ton of energy when they're learning. Learning is expensive in terms of the energy that our bodies consume, so it has to matter, it has to be important. So any way you can to find out about what your students care about, ask them about their interests and their passions, have them interview each other. As much as you can, make connections to real life. If I could ask my students or have them interview each other, if I know that someone's interested in horses or space travel or fashion design or firefighting, all of those things, you can fit just about any topic you want and somehow connect it to one of those things, as giving examples. And then you immediately get their attention, you get more engagement from them. It's also another very simple way is to offer student choices about the ways that they present their learning in terms of a project or assignment. What I often recommend is that you offer what I call 3 good choices. If you leave it completely open-ended, that can be overwhelming for a lot of kids. And they're just not sure whether it's the right thing. But if you offer them 3 good choices that are different in the ways that they do it, it makes it a little bit easier. And of course, then it means that whatever the choices better be acceptable to you, or you shouldn't have made them 3 good choices.
Right.
And the last is growth mindset. And here, the growth mindset really means that you have an understanding that your intelligence and your talent aren't fixed, that we develop them. We develop them by the activities that we engage in. It means understanding that mistakes are opportunities for learning. not things to feel bad about. It means understanding really that we sculpt our own brains. You know, we really can have a huge amount of influence on how our brains develop based on the experiences we give them. So teaching students about their brains and about neuroplasticity is what we're going to talk about in the next stretch. But just to hit on a couple of things right now, making sure students understand that they will get stuck. You know, we all need to understand this. We're going to get whatever we take on, you know, unless we sit around and, you know, have an infallible remote. Even the remote's going to die someday and we'll have to figure out something to do about it. So we're going to get stuck with something. And there are simple things that we can do to get unstuck. We can take a look at the problem we're stuck with and say, have I ever seen anything like this before? What did I do then? So that's one thing. I can get up and walk away from it for a minute or two and then come back. And that often helps refresh. Our brains continue to work on things in the background, sometimes even when we're not thinking about them consciously. And so that's sometimes a good way to get unstuck. And the final way, never forget, is to ask for help. Teacher, classmate, parent, there are lots of people we can ask for help. The second point that has to do with growth mindset is I'm going to recommend that everyone stop giving quizzes and that you start giving retrieval practice.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
So in some ways they're really the same thing, but a quiz is a judgment, you know, at least that's how most kids experience it. It's like, you know, we do use it as an assessment to figure out what kids have learned, what our students have learned. But it's not just important for us to know what they've learned. They need to know where they are in their learning.
Sure.
So when we start to help them understand that retrieving information, effortful retrieval of information, helps strengthen learning. It helps strengthen those neural connections that we made when we learned it. And so it can have a huge impact. So doing things like just reviewing something or reading your notes is pretty ineffective. It's very inefficient. If you really want to be efficient about it, give yourself a quiz. Give yourself an opportunity to practice retrieving the information that you want to have learned. And when you explain to students that strengthening learning is in this way is really about the most efficient and the best way that they can do this, and enables them to see what they know and what they still need to work on. And oh, by the way, in the background, you probably are figuring out what they know too. But if you position retrieval practice rather than a quiz as something that is for their benefit and that they can take some ownership of, and there's, you know, it's not, don't put a grade on it would be my advice. You know, they learn from doing this process. And then the other idea that I think is intriguing and fun to do in this current environment. You know, sometimes we put up on the hallways, we put everybody's projects, you know, their drawings or their essays or whatever. We used to put it up and down the halls of school. So we can't do that, but you can create a virtual hall on a web page or something like that. And you can create digital portfolios for students. And the power of that is that they start to have a collection of things that demonstrate that there was once a time when they couldn't do it, and now they're able to do it. And the more you can reinforce that, the more I think that reinforces growth mindset. The fact that we're always, you know, learning how to do things, maybe getting some failures along the way, but as we work at it, we get better and better. And then have some reminders of those things. So in this next stretch, again, I could do this in a video, but I want to talk about some neuroplasticity. And talk about what is learning. So what I'd like to do is have everybody type into the chat window how they would define learning. I'm going to see if I can pull it up. Get my chat window to open. All right, it doesn't want to do it for me. Okay. Well, just everybody who's inclined to share a little bit about learning and what your definition of learning is. And I'm not going to ask Lou and Judy and Susan, I'm not going to ask you because most of you have been through the training that where we develop this, the logic and the process of understanding this. But so you can characterize learning, of course, in lots of different ways. And in education, we mostly focus on content, mastering content and skills and sort of measuring that. We want to know what the outcome was and you know, did they learn that? But one of the things that can really help us understand this whole concept of neuroplasticity as background for helping our students then do it is that it's a biological process. It's actually the making and strengthening of connections between thousands of neurons. As many times as I use that slide, I can't believe I have a typo on it, but I do. Forming neural networks or maps. And then when we recall information, we don't go pull it out of storage. We don't have to go find the closet that it's in. We're actually reactivating those previously made connections. And so the more we reactivate them, the easier it is to activate them again, which is why retrieval practice is such a great idea, because we're actually activating them again. We're using that energy to recall that information. So the neuroscientists call this neurons that fire together, wire together. The more we activate that network of neurons, the stronger the connections and the easier it is to reactivate that network. So our brains become what our brains do. And our job as parents and teachers is to help those children's brains build really strong connections for what we want them to learn so that it's not as difficult to retrieve the information. The idea is, Melina Uncafer, who I think is at UCLA, talks about this: make learning harder so that retrieval gets easier.
Oh, I like that.
I do too. And you know, the more you actually engage, the more you work it, the more you elaborate, the more ways that you interact with the material at the time of learning is just going to make it easier. So it seems harder at the time, but it's a lot easier when you get to the point of the test or using it in real life. So this is just a quick little picture about what all these neurons look like. We have about 85 billion of them in our brains. And as you can see, each neuron has this one axon coming out of it. That's the part that carries the message from the neuron to another neuron. And it just has one of those. And then each neuron has a whole bunch of things that point out from it, like branches that are called dendrites. And the dendrites are the receiving part. So neurons can be getting messages from all different connecting neurons that are in that network. And some are hyping up the signal and some are tamping down the signal, but it's a really busy place. And this communication, all of this activity, sending messages back and forth among these neurons, is the basis of all behavior. So everything that we do, everything that we think is all about these groups of little cells in our heads conducting all of this activity and sending messages. This is a slide of brain tissue. This is what neurons look like. Obviously, this is enlarged many times. You could put 30,000 neurons on the head of a pin. I mean, they're very, very small. You can see the cell bodies, those little black dots, and you can see the axons and all this profusion of connections. Just think about it. There are trillions and trillions and trillions of connections. And all of them are sort of constantly communicating, transmitting signals activating, calming other neurons, really a busy place. But we don't start off like that. So when we're born, these are two more images of brain tissue from the cortex, but from younger individuals. So the one on the left is a newborn. One on the right is a 2-year-old. When we're born, we have about the same, we have 85 billion neurons. And when we're adults, we have about 85 billion neurons. We don't create a lot of new neurons. Over our lives, we do create some. But for the most part, with the fact that our brains grow, our brain typically weighs about a pound on average at birth, and then it's about 3 pounds as an adult. By the time that we're 5 or 6, our brains are 90% of their adult size and weight. And that's not more neurons. That's not more cells. What it is this incredible proliferation of connections. This is a picture of learning. All of the creation of these more connections, and all of this, what's happening, to think of the things that are happening during these years. We're interacting with our environment, learning to grasp, to walk. You've ever seen a child walk? You know, they get up and they fall down, they get up and they fall down, they get up and they fall down. And there's a lot of trial and error in that. That's the greatest growth. Lou's smiling because she's got a little one who has been through that, a little grandchild.
Yes. Ooh.
So when it comes to talking to our kids about neuroplasticity and about their brains, there are a lot of ways to do that. Lou is actually an expert on this, and I will share, anybody who's particularly interested in that, I will certainly share Lou's information later. She did this in her school, spent a lot of time teaching kids about their brains. But this is a wonderful book called Your Fantastic Elastic Brain. And this is something where you could do an online read aloud with the kids. They could be reading part of it. You could be reading part of it. I have a few slides just to give you a sense for the kind of ways that this really speaks to kids about their brains. So, and kids are really fascinated by their brains. You know, what does your brain really do? It fills the space between your ears. Well, yes, but it can do so much more. Your brain helps you think and remember and name what you see and hear, and move your body and feel both touch and emotions. Your brain does all the things that make you you. This is a wonderful thing. You could do all kinds of projects on this, having kids talk about things that they like. You know, this little girl apparently likes red foods. Her favorite word is elbow. You know, ping pong champ. She knows some global landmarks. She's good at sports, I think this is. And obviously the scan didn't quite capture all of this. And then it goes into some discussion at a very basic level, but anatomically and from a neuroscience base, correct. Things like helping them understand that there's a part of their brain, the prefrontal cortex, that helps them plan. This is a part of the brain that's a little tiny organ called the hippocampus, which helps us create memories. The amygdala, which is where we experience emotions. I know one teacher who has taught the kids about the amygdala being responsible for emotions. And one day when one of the kids got upset, he was very anxious and upset at something that happened. He says, "Darn it, I'm in my amygdala right now." So when kids understand that there's a reason for these experiences that they're having, then they can feel more comfortable about it, and it's not just they're not out of control anymore. You know, it's something that they can actually start to manage. It talks about making mistakes, the fact that you're training your brain and you're going to remember the mistake and try something else until you get it right. And that's how our brains learn and grow. And if you aren't willing to take those risks, you won't take the chances that stretch. So it uses that concept of plasticity and elasticity, your fantastic elastic brain. And then it ends up with the idea that essentially what we each are is a neurosculptor. And I love that image. And you could, have kids talk about, that you could use Play-Doh or clay or any kind of other material or just drawing, and have them talk about how they would like to shape their brains, the things that they would really like to be good at. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask two of my delightful guests here. We often do this. We do a think, pair, share. A think, pair, share involves in an online meeting, what you would do is send the kids out into breakout rooms, 2 in each one. You can actually, in Zoom, you can do it randomly assignment, or you can have pre-assigned, you can have people, pairs that work together, whatever works the best for you. But what we want to do is we want to take that information and pretend that we've just read this book or discussed this book. And what we want to do now is sort of engage them in thinking about how this applies to them. And so in a pair, actually, why don't we just do, have the 3 of you talk together. We can do it as an extra person, so we'll have 3. And just share quickly something that was hard for you to do or to learn and how you got better at it. And then I'm going to ask one person to report out, but not your story. I want you to tell somebody else's story of the ones that I've shared with you.
So we're going into another room. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not going to physically put you in another room. And everybody's going to get to listen in and peek in and watch on your private discussion here. So we're simulating.
Okay. So each one of us tells a story, and then when we come back, I'm going to tell Judy's story or Susan's story.
Yeah, and I don't think we have time for very many. So actually, why don't we just do this? Lou, why don't you tell a story, and then Judy, maybe we could ask you to pretend that you're coming out of this, one-on-one conversation you've been having, and then just share Lou's story after she does that.
I'm summarizing in essence.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm retelling. But summarizing. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so you just want me to go ahead and start a story of
just something that was hard for you to learn and how you got better at it, like maybe Piranha Pass. No,
okay.
Just kidding.
A couple of years back, I started working for Disney in their field trips and so forth, and it was great. That's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach there, but in order to do that, you first had to be working for Disney, so I had to find some job. So I was selling tickets and sitting inside the little booth, and it was so hard for me. Do you know that there's 154 different prices at Disney tickets? And the people in my class were all younger than me. They're all out of college. There's a whole college group, and they could whiz through the computer left and right. And even though I'm a little techie, I couldn't switch from the screens from one to another. What I could do was talk to the guests, our customers at the window. I was good at that. So what I had to do, I actually asked for an extra training day, and everybody in the class was like, what? We already know how to do this. And I didn't. So I had a private lesson just for myself to go over the technology and learn all the different prices. How was that? Did that work? Or what, more detail or what?
So now I'm going to pretend we're pulling you back out of the breakout room into the session. And I know that Judy and Lou had a chance to share stories, and Judy, I'd like you to tell us something that Lou found difficult and how she overcame that.
She told a fascinating story about how she wanted to work at Disney doing field trip management, but ended up having to work as a ticket taker, and a very difficult part of her job was understanding how perhaps 154 different kinds of tickets needed to be sorted when people came to the window and they had different pricing, different family sizes perhaps. And the younger folks who were doing the same kind of job found it much easier because they were even more computer savvy than Lou. But Lou, being the bright, practical person she is, asked for more training, and she had an extra private training session so that she could get those skills. It was brilliant.
Okay. So there are a couple of things that happen when we do this. What happens when someone else tells your story? How did it feel, Lou, when Judy told your story?
Uh, as I'm listening to her, I'm like, oh, she's doing a good job telling it. I'm thinking, oh, what did I leave out? Or, no, I thought she did a fine job. She could condense it and hit all the high points, what I thought were good.
So it's developing listening skills, for
Mhm.
sure, for kids, because they know they're going to have to listen and remember, come out with it. They can also talk about this. So one of the things that Judy said about you is that because you're such a bright and capable person.
Yeah,
Now, you didn't say I'm a bright and capable person,
yeah,
No.
that's very nice.
but she can say that about you without, you don't have to brag. And what you're doing is you're hearing someone else talk about you. Remember, we talked about every child should hear their own voice said by somebody else. This is a really nice way to do that, where they get to hear something really positive about something that person, they get acknowledged for something that they've accomplished that was hard and that they overcame. And so I think that this idea of you know, developing empathy and listening skills on the one side, and then affirming the person when they come out and share the story. Susan, did that make sense to you?
Sorry, I have to unmute.
No worries.
Yes, that makes sense. And I would agree with, there was somebody that said something in the chat, Stephanie, where you feel heard. So you have those kinds of feelings as well.
Yes, yeah, we do need,
Belonging, it enhances belonging, as I think is what you said, Betsy.
right. And you start to really appreciate, the members of the community and start to feel support for each other and things like that. So great comment, Stephanie. Appreciate that. So really, these mindsets, having that sense of belonging, that we did that with that opening ritual was the something good and new. We did that with just now with that think, pair, share. Purpose and relevance, we want to connect directly to them. Kids love to learn about their brains, so that idea of crafting something or applying this to their own brains. And then the whole idea of growth mindset, of course, we did very explicitly here, encourage trying new things and doing that neuroplasticity lesson. So we're getting there, guys. We've got a couple more stretches to go. All right. So we're gonna practice a skill we just learned today. And remember, I'm not gonna administer a quiz. We're just gonna do a little retrieval practice. If I said, okay, now it's time for a quiz, everybody's blood pressure would go up a couple of points and our palms would get a little sweaty. And of course, we're not just checking learning. What we're doing is helping us learn. And hopefully this is not going to be too different. So let's all do, I think we all did a pretty good job of understanding. So let's do sign language for I understand. Okay, great. And that's okay, so someone else said, oh, I understand. And I want to say now, me too. Oh, we're doing me too. Okay. And oh, maybe there's something I didn't understand. And so I'm typing my question in the chat window. And if you were actually in my class and I would say, okay, does that make sense? You would say, don't understand. Okay. And last but not least, I want to just thank you for being such brave participants in my little experiment today, and I give you a big round of applause.
Okay.
All right, great. So that was a little bit harder and took a little more energy than me reviewing the signs and just going over them or you reading through your notes. But this, doing it, practicing it, that made learning a little bit harder so that retrieval will get easier.
I like that.
Mhm.
So closing ritual. One of the things that I like to do is to have everybody, because again, this is more retrieval practice, think about something you learned that day that I think grew my brain, or something I did or created today that I'm proud of. And so what I would like to do now is I'm going to take the pressure off Lou and Judy and Susan. And I would like everybody, you don't have to share it, of course, if you don't want to, but take a minute here to reflect on our session today and what it means to you. You know, how you might use something you learned today that really got you thinking, because when something gets you thinking, your brain is looking for ways to connect. All those neurons are reaching out to try to connect with other ones. So I'd love it if you would share that in the chat window. And maybe I can get, because I can't seem to, I'm having some technical issues apparently today. And I can't get it to show me the chat window. So Karen, if you're there, I know you're there. If you could, as people start to share their ideas and the things that meant something to them, if maybe you could share those and read a couple out.
Well, Susan's been answering them along the way and has been doing a good job too. So I don't want to jump on her parade there.
Is anybody sharing anything that they learned today? Well, while you're doing that, just, you know, the closing ritual again is about community. It's something we share in common. When you hear somebody says, oh, I learned about neurons today. Oh yeah, I did too. You know, it helps reinforce that connected, those ideas. And you may come up with something else that works for you, and that's great, but something that is, again, has that sense of closure, of community, of having worked and done good work together during your class.
Well, I absolutely love the statement of make learning harder so retrieval is easier. You know, students need to understand learning is hard. You got to get out of your comfort zone. And if it's real easy, then you're not learning much. So I think that that's an important point. But I think your discussion on teaching the children how they learn, teach them about the brain is just so important, no matter what age, from preschoolers all the way through college age. We need to have a definite class in that just so they understand how they retrieve information, how they learn. Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. That is absolutely essential. And I would bet that, at least for the four of us, that was never part of our early education.
Oh, no.
Maybe not until college.
Yeah, not even in college. We really didn't have it. Was after college, after I got out.
Yeah.
At the big lunch and learned about it. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I mean, there was a little bit, maybe a little bit in psychology in college.
Mm-hmm.
I got interested early because I was a number of kids in my class in like 5th grade were part of an experiment where they were doing early work with EEGs. And so,
yeah.
I think they were doing EEGs on normal brains just to, you know, establish the sort of baseline. And so I went and had the things that were glued to my head, you know, worried if they could read my thoughts and think, you know, and I knew it was my brain, but you know, nobody told me what was going on. So,
yeah.
All right.
I want to mention that children are never too young to learn. When I was principal, and I would go into all the classes and teach about the brain, I think my greatest accomplishment was my preschool, the 4-year-olds. We had parent night, and our 4-year-olds talked about the brain, and you walked into their classroom, it was walking into a child's brain. They had a picture of a face on the outside. They had neurons hanging from the ceiling. They knew what they were. They knew what dendrites were and how we learned and connected. They had projects all over the room, and I was so proud of them. So,
Wow.
and we just introduced it, but the teacher took it further. And she built all of her classes around that. All her science, social studies, religion class, everything was centered around the brain. It was great. It was excellent.
That's remarkable.
I think one of the things that I have worked on for the past few years with all the different folks I work with is to start with the statement that everybody has a brain, so therefore everybody's born to think and learn.
Very good.
No exceptions.
Yeah, I mean, with all the different cultures and, you know, ways that people look or ways that people dress or ways that people do everything, if you took the brains out of their heads, you would not be able to identify them and put them with the culture.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
And yet, that said, it's the culture that has done a lot of the shaping of the brain.
Absolutely. But we have the ability to learn any culture.
Yes.
And to relearn culture. You know, if we're, you know, obviously it gets a little bit more difficult as we get older, but the fact is our brains are plastic throughout our lives and we continue to learn. So I hope everybody has shared with us a little bit about something maybe they're taking away from today that helped grow their brain. I can't check the chat window, but I'll be able to see it later. And so those were our 7 stretches. I'm going to give you a bonus stretch today. This is our Q&A time because it's a webinar. So please, if we could, Karen, if you think there are some questions maybe that would be interesting to share as a group, or maybe ones that haven't been answered, love to hear those.
Yeah, the Magic School Bus series. Pam Neville happened to comment on this. The Magic School Bus series, especially the one on senses, is another great book. Yes, that is. Thanks for reminding us.
There's also another one that I found recently. I'm reaching into my bag. It's called Sometimes You Win and Sometimes You Learn.
Oh,
for
that's
kids.
great.
John Maxwell. And
Wow.
it reinforces that idea too. That was I had a parent who, when I recommended the Fantastic Elastic Brain, also suggested this one. So,
Great.
Karen, any questions or ideas? Anybody sharing there?
Oh, there's a ton of sharing and a ton of great ideas and a ton of thanks and great comments about things they learned today. Not too many questions.
Okay. Why don't you share a couple of things that people said they learned today?
Oh, the one talked about the movie Inside Out. Yes, I love it. It's a Disney film. It
Yeah.
is. It's fabulous. I especially love her abstract thinking. So that is a great movie, especially for middle school kids. They'll understand that, I think, a little better when you're looking for something. But Inside Out is awesome. I loved
It's
it.
a fabulous movie.
Yeah.
Such a good movie.
Yeah, they used some serious neuroscientists to help develop that.
I could believe it. Yeah. Very clever. Very clever.
People enjoyed a lot of the suggestions that you made early on in the presentation about everybody learning each other's name, repeating each other's name, and saying something positive. They loved the images of the brain and how your brain develops as you learn.
That's probably one of the most powerful pictures. And it did, you know, we started using it years and years ago when we were working with Pat Wolf, who has an amazing book called Brain Matters. And then another book she wrote on the reading brain with Pam Nevels, who's also on today. That, you know, if I had one picture, you know, to talk about neurons and brains and how they connect and what learning is, that's probably it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, Karen, anything else?
I'm just reading. You know, Betsy, you're just gonna have fun reading all these. It's just
I am sure I will. Yeah, no, that's not going to help me see them. All right, we got to do a little troubleshooting on the Zoom stuff. But okay, well, it was great to have everybody who was able to participate today. Again, we're just so glad you could be here. Would love to continue the conversation, or if you have questions. I know sometimes questions come to mind, you know, you in the shower the next morning and I wonder about something, you know, so would love to hear from you and continue to talk about this stuff. I want to say special thanks to Lou Whitaker and Judy Belk and Susan Clayton for joining me and learning some sign language and having hopefully some fun along the way.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Always important to listen to you, Betsy.
Oh,
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Betsy.
oh
Much appreciated.
you're so welcome. I've learned so much from all of you, and it's nice to have this community that really cares about this stuff, where we can share ideas and continue to support each other. So, you know, that's just such a valuable thing. I'm very grateful for it.
And figure out how to do Zoom together,
Yes.
right? Sharing screens, not sharing screens, right?
It's a
Yeah.
technology piece that's hard.
Yes,
But you
Yeah.
can learn it.
yes,
All right.
we're getting there.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Okay, so again, thanks so much. I'm thinking about doing something in the really near future on parent-teacher conferences,
Oh.
which I think are taking on a little bit of a new shift now with remote learning, because
Ah,
parents have a different perspective on their children's learning and the process
right.
than they do before. So, so stay tuned for that sometime on some Zoom call near you. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll say
Bye.
goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, that was great.